Yeah, there you go. Welcome, welcome. Great to see everybody coming in. We'll give folks another minute to jump out of the waiting room into the District 3 community meeting. Good to see folks. And thanks to all the staff for joining too. Glad to have you a part of the conversation. We'll give folks another minute to jump in. All right. Hey, Katie Howard. Oh, you're on mute. No worries.
Hey, good morning. Happy Friday, folks.
It's a beautiful day. 82 degrees today. Can you believe end of October, 82 degrees?
Unfortunately, I can't. But it is a beautiful day.
Okay. It's always a beautiful day in Atlanta Public Schools. We have one more minute before we jump in. Thank you all for making time. I see some folks that were here from that were also at the Junior League literacy conversation last night. Thanks for joining that. Get extra credit. That's a lot of APS time in 24 hours. So thanks for being a part of that conversation. It's great to be with that group. All right, I got 10:02. Keith, what do you think? All right, Keith says, let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go.
Welcome, everyone, to the District 3 community meeting. So glad that you could be here to join us in October. Let me just set the stage a little bit, remind folks of the purpose here. We're here to share what's going on in the district. I need to hear your perspective. You all shouldn't be hearing each other's perspective, but this is not a decision-making meeting. We're not going to take a vote at the end. We're not going to do a poll. We're just here to exchange information and educate each other. Couple of norms that I always remind folks of: presume good intent. We're all here because we're trying to do the right thing by kids. And so please presume that your neighbor and everyone speaking is coming at it from the right place. Give and make space so folks are heard, so we can make sure that this truly is a community meeting. Feel free to use the chat. It will be monitored by staff. And so if folks put something in, I might miss it, but I encourage staff to make sure we know about it. We're going to stick to an hour to respect folks' time. It's not going to be enough, but we have other ways. This is not the only way to engage. We have Let's Talk. We can reach out. If you have something specific, Let's Talk is great for that. I'm always available in the meeting. And if everyone could mute themselves too, just awesome. Thank you. I do have a newsletter that goes out every month. It'd be great if you feel free to sign up for that. I'll put that link in the chat. Yeah, so let's dive in. So the way we structure these meetings is kind of 3 parts. The first part is going to be, I'm going to give some quick updates of from what's happening at the board table and from what I'm hearing in conversations with various community members to get everybody on board. We're going to have the key topic of this meeting is going to be facility utilization. We're fortunate to have Dan Drake here, who's going to recap a little bit of the presentation from last board meeting, and we'll get into a little bit of conversation around that. But then the bulk of the meeting is for you all. Keith is going to facilitate us engaging in conversation, and so we can make sure that every voice is that all minds are clear. Okay, first a few updates. November 5th is election day. Do not send your kid to school. But you should vote if you haven't voted already. I'm not going to take the time to indicate who the candidates are. I would say go check them out on the internet, but probably don't do that. But just at this point, you probably know who the candidates are. So please vote. It's important to model that, but no school. The superintendent is having community meetings, and they are going on throughout the district. The next one, I believe, is in North Atlanta. I think that's November 7th at 6 p.m. And if somebody could put in the chat the community meeting schedule. There's still a few more coming. I think he's about halfway through. And those are great ways to be heard and to hear his vision.
Did you sign up for the Zoom thing? Or remember,
chat,
we were supposed to be each other's accountability people for the Ken Zeff thing.
There, awesome. Thank you.
Board member Zeff, the next community meeting is next week for the Thorough Cluster. Are you talking about the listening sessions with the superintendent?
Yeah, I think there's a couple coming up for, yeah. So I think Keith is gonna put them in on the chat. I think there's 4 or 5
Okay.
coming up. Thank you for that. But yeah, we make sure that, or Travis, thank you, Travis. I didn't see Travis here. Thank you, Travis. I appreciate you putting that in the chat. All right, a couple quick updates and these are really recaps of conversations I've had with a variety of community members, but I'd like to get everybody on the same page so we're all aware some of these conversations are happening. I'm going to just talk a little bit about security, talk a little bit about facilities. I'm going to talk a little bit about assessment, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Drake to talk us through some updates. So real quickly on security, it's obviously on everyone's minds from the events that happened outside of Atlanta a month or 2 ago. At the last board meeting, the board voted to to allocate funds for a school resource officer in all of our elementary schools. Right now, we have them assigned to middle and high school. So there's now allocation of $2.3 million to add that to elementary school budgets, or add that position to elementary schools. It will take a minute. I want to caution folks. It's going to take a minute for that to work through the HR process. I think there's 35 open slots, and we got 25 folks in the process. So it might not be till the beginning of next year that you see that. And I will say this is something that we're keeping an eye on. I don't know if this is going to be part of the budget long term, but at least through the end of the year, we want to make sure that we have that visible presence in our elementary schools. Schools also have, every teacher has a Centex badge, which allows them to signal for help if they need help. We have safety vestibules. I think that's in almost all schools now, should be done by 2024. And so that is a good way to keep our schools safe from folks from the outside. And perhaps more importantly, the superintendent launched a safety committee, and that has been meeting with parents and community members and teachers to provide insight into what our security posture should be going into the new year. So that is ongoing in the safety world. In the facilities world, I've had a bunch of conversations around Garden Hills Elementary. Folks know that Garden Hills is going through a rehab. It's slated to be renovated. Let me just say that about the relocation, those conversations are ongoing. I think there's a meeting next week. We hear you that moving across town, there's a lot of complexity with that. That issue is being navigated right now. I'm not breaking any news on that topic tonight, but I know that staff is looking into it and hoping to come up with something that's as least disruptive as possible for Garden Hills Elementary. And just last thing on assessment before I hand it over to Mr. Drake. There's been I've had a bunch of conversations with folks about the misalignment between assessment and instruction. That if we're expecting kids to know something, that's what they should be assessed on. And if there's a mismatch, then we need to call that out. We need to fix that. Short term, Dr. Johnson has been diving deep into this issue with the academic team to find these issues and address them and make sure that the teachers have the resources they need. And so, that's not going to get fixed overnight, but by naming it, identifying it, and then making sure that parents get the information they need about what's being assessed and that kids get the information they can prepare. Longer term, he's convening an assessment work group similar to the safety work group, and that will have parents, teachers, administrators, really looking at what should our balanced assessment look like in 2025-26 as we head into the new year. So those two things are happening in tandem, and so more information on that. That's a lot of news in 8 minutes, but that's what you pay for. That's what you get here. So now I'm going to turn it over to my friend and your friend, Dan Drake, to talk about the annual facilities capacity review. Just a couple introductions, as Dan pulls us up. The longer presentation was at the board meeting a couple weeks back. The reason I asked Dan to make this presentation to the board, to the community, because we're going to be on a journey. Today we're not having the larger conversation about what the district should look like in the coming years, but we're trying to get everybody on the same page. We're trying to level set so folks have a common set of facts about where we are and what some of the challenges are. So in December, they'll be coming back with more detail about projections and for utilization, but this is just to set the level about where we go and get us ready, because in order to build a high trust environment, we need to be transparent and candid. And so that's the goal of this work. So with that, I introduce Mr. Dan Drake, who is our Senior Executive Director of Facilities. Dan.
Thank you, Board Member Zeff, and welcome everybody. Just want to give you, as Board Member Zeff referenced, this is just slides that we took out that we presented at the October 7th board meeting or the work session prior to the board meeting, talking about our annual review process, and we'll give you the highlights of this. So starting off with our typical timeline, the annual review process is something that we've done for the last 2 years. This will be the 3rd year. And when we call annual review, we're annually reviewing our capacity, our enrollment, our forecasted enrollment, and our utilization of all of our school facilities. And this came out of the facilities master plan, where one of the strong recommendations from the facilities master plan is that you should annually look and see where we are relative to the projections that they provided. So what our normal process is, in the months of October to December, we will do our forecast of our future enrollment forecast. We'll look at our capacities, work with the principals, get all that updated. And then in January, we're finalizing the enrollment report, and it gets presented at the February board meeting, typically. I keep saying typically because we're going to be doing it a little bit differently this year. And then February to April, we've done this in the past 2 years where we've had redistricting that have come out of this. We did the Woodson Park last year, which will go into effect next fall. And then May first read if there's any redistricting, and then June approval. We did that again last year. In each of the annual reports, we've had this trigger slide that's in here. And I just want to show one piece on here. It's the yellow that's highlighted below, is that we've typically been focusing on the greater than 100%, but we've put this in our report every year that the annual review, that for schools less than 65%, we would not do anything for the next 2 years. That was last year and the year prior. But in the 24-25 school year, this school year, we would possibly start looking at those underutilized schools. Any type of redistricting or any type of decisions would then be in effect for the fall of 2026. So here are the triggers that we are looking at. And again, this language you hear at the bottom, this is that same language that talked about less than 65%. We won't look until this year, but I want to walk you through the triggers: red, yellow, the green, blue, and purple. So the red and yellow are: red is any school that we consider overutilized, that is in 2 of the next 3 years. It's overutilization, so you go to your red schools. The yellow schools are the ones that are approaching capacity. The green and blue is where we like to see our schools, especially in the green and in the upper part of the blue. We like to see our schools stay in that 70 to 90% area. And then less than 65% is what we consider severely underutilized. And again, those are the ones that we were referencing. So before I get and give you a little sneak peek, and I say sneak peek because we don't have the official numbers, the official forecast, and that'll be coming out in our the official report coming out in the next couple of months. But I want to give you a little bit of background of national and regional school enrollment trends to say this is not just unique to Atlanta Public Schools. So here you can see this is the historic, which is the last years from 2012, 13 to right before the pandemic. You can see the historic enrollment of the entire pre-K through 12th grade enrollment throughout the United States. We're approaching 51 million students. And then during the pandemic, it went down to 49.4 million, lost over 1 million students. It's come back a little bit since then, but it's projected by the NCES to actually fall to 46 million over the next 8 to 10 years. Georgia, so let's look at the state of Georgia. You can see that the state of Georgia, we had about 1.5 million students in the 24-25. It's peaked at 1.72 million right before the pandemic. It also lost hundreds of thousands of kids in the state of Georgia, it's slightly rebounded as well. One of the things that is driving this is our birth rate, and you can see that the birth rate since 2005, both the birth rate and the total number of actual live births since 2005 has been falling, and it's now catching up to us and other school systems. So let's talk about the 24-25 annual report, the sneak peek. So again, we gave you those red, yellows, greens, and blues. What we're looking at right now is that and this is based on our preliminary numbers from September 10th. The report that we're going to be presenting is actually going to be coming out a little bit earlier this year. It'll be coming out in December. And we'll have these numbers may shift a little bit based on the new enrollment numbers, the new forecast, and some of the capacity reviews that we do with the principals. So right now we've got 2 schools in the Jackson and Midtown cluster, the 2 high schools that are greater than 100%. We've got 4 schools, 2 of them in the Jackson cluster, 1 in Midtown, 1 in North Atlanta, that are in yellow. So we were looking at those. That includes King Middle School. That also includes North Atlanta High School. And I'll show you what that looks like on a map. And then we've got 6 and 17. Those are the 23 schools that are in the area that we want. But the big issue, one of the big issues that we will start looking at this year is the 43 schools that are severely underutilized. 43 out of our 72 school facilities have utilizations less than 65%. And you can see, and that includes, I'll give you an example, including South Atlanta, where all 7 schools in South Atlanta, all 7 of them, 7 out of 7, have utilization less than 65%. Here's a map of what that looks like. Again, you can see on the left side, the Midtown High School and Jackson High School in the red, and then you got Parkside Elementary, King Middle School, Centennial Charter, and North Atlanta High School. Those are approaching capacity, and then you can see the distribution of the 43 underutilized schools in every cluster. So this year, why do we need to explore? So one of the things that we're going to be looking at is school size and right sizing the district for 2 reasons. One is that we've got some budget challenges that you may have heard Lisa Bracken, our CFO, talk through. Challenges over the next few fiscal years. It's causing us to look at efficiencies of scale and a right size review. And school size, the actual capacity of the school, is one of the main drivers of the right size budget review, and allows us to review the number of schools by looking at the smallest schools for potential consolidation. So those are things that we'll be looking at across the district. And then those decisions will help us as we get into the next SPLOST. So the next SPLOST we call SPLOST 2027, which is when the sales tax collected from July 27 to June of 32. And then I'll work up the bullet point from the bottom, which work backwards. We basically, to be prepared for that next SPLOST, there'll be a vote in the fall of 26. But in order to have that vote in fall of 2026, in the spring, May, June, we have to have a final project list. To have that final project list, we would need to know the right size decisions, if there are any, by next year at this time, so that we can start preparing and getting all of those recommendations and what we're going to be doing with different facilities based on those right size decisions going into that spring project list. We are in the next 60 days, we'll be done with our facility conditions analysis, where we're looking at every school at their assessment and helping us understand which ones we're going to be looking at. And the right size, again, will help focus the direction of the entire SPLOST 2027. So it's important from both the budgetary reasons on the left side and the SPLOST on the right side. Based on that, we are pushing up because we believe we're going to need extensive public engagement, stakeholder engagement, in January through April. We are pushing up our annual review report to December. So at the board meeting, it'll be as an information item, And it's, it's appropriately called the Enrollment Utilization Report at December board. We'll have all the updated stuff, and then all the information will be updated, including those different red, yellow, green, blue, and purple tables. And then during the months of January to April, we'll require more extensive stakeholder engagement, because it could include right sizing recommendations, redistricting, and all these other items that we may be looking at. And that would then go to a board first read in May of 2025 and a board approval in June. If it's approved in June, it would go into effect in August of 26. Wouldn't be next school year, it'd be the following school year, the August of 2026. So kind of went through all of the, give you kind of quick overview of what we presented at the October 7th meeting. And I will turn it back over to board member Zeff.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Thank you for taking us through this. And so we're going to create some space for some questions on this, but I just want to bound this a little bit, because we're not here yet to talk about what the district should look like. That's when we get information in December, and then that process in the spring. If you're probably looking closely at Travis's screen, his heart's probably picking up his pace a little bit. That's good. That means we're working them. That process is going to be in the spring. So this is not the time. So now is not the time to, what we're trying to do is bring folks along so we all understand the challenges ahead of us. And so let's open up for some questions now, and then after about 10 minutes or so, then I'd like to transition to questions beyond this topic. So
yep. And so board members have, so the public is clear, we're only taking questions as it relates to facilities.
Correct.
So if you have any questions regarding anything else, we're gonna
there'll be time.
So Waukesha, good morning.
Good morning, Keith. My question was the next topic, but I do have a question which I put in the chat. And I hope everyone see it, because this $100 million challenge did not come out of thin air. How did we not hear about this under Dr. Battle? And we have been screaming to the top of our lungs for years about how certain schools are underutilized and certain schools are busting at the seam. And it's so sad that we already know the schools on the south side and the west side will be targeted. And I'm gonna say what it is, because it is what it is. The city and APS should have been working together to make sure that people in this city had housing. We don't push families and children out of this city. And now we got all these buildings underutilized in predominantly Black area. And I'm sorry, but the alarm needs to be sound, because this is going to be detrimental to a lot of communities. When you look at those three, like, we knew about this. This is not something new. My question is, I know you're not going to make a decision, but what is going to be done to especially keep some of those historic areas? Make sure you preserve those schools, those communities, and their history, because we're going to fight like hell about these schools. We're not just going to let people close these schools like that and hurt our community no more. So I want that to be on the record.
Thank you, Waukesha. And I think your point, this is coming at us like a freight train, and we need to take action. And I think your point about preserving communities is going to be front and center in this conversation. So thank you for that.
Yep, thank you, Waukesha. So then we'll go to Elizabeth, and then after Elizabeth, we'll go to Tamara. Good morning.
Morning, you hear me? Yeah, okay. Two questions. One is this interchange of the word campus and schools is really making this a challenge to look at. There's this system, you guys, if you could use the term school, then you'd be combining the dual campus schools to one larger capacity, because those schools have the ability to flex grades amongst their two campuses, which is really not being taken into account. So for instance, in the North Atlanta cluster, you've identified multiple schools as being under-enrolled, but the reality is the drab aspect, all but one of those are dual campus schools where they actually cannot combine all the students onto one of the two campuses. So something with the way this is worded it doesn't click, because you're really talking about campuses, not schools. So either change the wording one way or the other, please, or clarify this, make this easier to read, please. And then the other is the over 95% and above, we will monitor. Can we get clearer about what that means, particularly looking at zone audits, because we have other issues that happen when we hit over 95%. The board passed a ruling for us at the North Atlanta cluster, and I don't know if other clusters too, about 2 years ago, that if we're 95% or below, teachers in the cluster can send their children to schools within the cluster if they're not zoned to live in there. And that's been a big way for us to retain, particularly for our dual language immersion teachers. And so now we're hitting 96 capacity. So we've only been allowed to use the rule for 1 year, and it was meant as a teacher retention policy. So can we go ahead and kick in a zone affidavit or whatever, that audit or something like that before we hit 95? It seems like this window of 95 to 100 needs to be better utilized than we just wait to 100 and then there's a bunch of chaos, kind of. So those are my questions, but mostly it's very deceiving looking at this as campuses versus schools and that kind of discussion.
We'll take that back. Dan, do you want to?
Yeah, I could address the campus piece, and I could also start the second piece. So let's start. So the 72 that we're showing on here are actually school facilities. So yes, you are correct that if there's a dual campus, and you mentioned there's 3 dual campuses at the elementary level in North Atlanta. There's 1 in North Atlanta at the middle school. There's 1 at Douglas at the high school, and there's 1 in the Jackson cluster at the elementary. All of those dual campuses would be separate facilities, so they would count as 2 on here, and we're looking at each of those school facilities. The dual campuses will definitely be looked at as part of our review on the budgetary side because of the increase in budget to run dual campuses compared to not. As far as the 95%, just one thing to let you know, that's a little bit of a nuance that as well. Doesn't mean the school's at 95% now. It means that one of the next 5 years, it is or will be at 95%. It could be now, or it could also be in the future. And so what these look at is our 5-year forecast, and looks at any one of the 5 years. If it's like 90% this year, 92, and then 1 year hits 95, then it goes in the yellow as something for us to be looking at. And I do agree that we should be looking at, we do, Corey Edwards is looking at some possibilities of looking at some of these audits as we look at this. And yes, you're correct, the 95% for the teachers in the cluster or any employees in the cluster, and then 90% is the other trigger for school choice that we will stop both of those at.
I mean, we hit an issue where we were under 95% at the beginning of the budgeting process for Go Team, and then by the time final budgets came out, we were over the 95%. So there was a rule change within months for us. And also, you're not, then we were over 95% at the beginning of the actual school, and you're also paid for children over that 95%, and we weren't, because that didn't happen in the budget projection season, but happened in the actual season. So some of these nuanced rules affect budgets in schools, and like, why did we pick 95, not 93? Why did, just I have some questions about how are we picking these numbers, and when these things flip, it causes issues, making sure we're prepared for that.
Thanks, Lily. I think this nuance is going to be important as we dive into this, and I think especially as we get into the spring, we can, get communities' input in this. Is going to have to drive where we land.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. So we'll go to Tamara next, and Melvin will be our last question as it relates to facilities before we shift to our general Q&A. So good morning, Tamara.
Good morning. I just wanted to quickly follow up on something that Waikisha said, and it is something that you can look at in enrollment per cluster over time when she says about the decline in the housing. And so the steep declines in enrollment in some of our clusters coincide with demolition of housing and not replacing it in the previous 10, 15 years. So that is something to look at and keep in mind as things go forward, especially if there are plans at the city level to rectify that situation. And then I really appreciate you guys talking about, getting more nuance between percent utilization versus efficiency. I think that that is going to be a very important topic of conversation, because when you talk about underutilization, it can mask things, right? Because if you have, I'm just going to pick on Spark, right? They've got 429 kids, you know, which for an elementary school would be considered to be a size where you can start to capture, you know, enough money to try to educate the kids, you know, even though that they have a capacity now of 693. That's very different than having, let's say you're fully utilized. I don't think we have a school like this, but you're fully utilized and you only have 200 kids. It really makes it hard to get enough funding to have the kind of personnel, everything in place, programs, et cetera, and it impacts the kid. On the flip side, for the overutilization, that is a little bit harder. It's like at some point you can't put any more kids in the building, and at some point before you get there, it starts to affect the kids' experience. And I appreciate looking at other districts. One of the things that we have, especially in town Atlanta, is we don't have access to parcel sizes as large as some of the other districts have to build these really large schools. So that is another point of utilization. And then the final thing is, as we look at this, the population of the city does continue to grow. And while the population of school-age kids might not be soaring, it is getting larger. And what are we doing to try to capture, like increase our capture rate more than what we do now? Because we don't capture, like, I don't think we're looking at, you know, are we trying to capture kids and bring them into APS as opposed to just letting them go private because they assume that they're going to go private or charter or whatever. So, and then I'll let it go.
Thank you for that, Tamara. For sure. I mean, as we build high quality, high performing schools and they're effective, we expect to see more kids come back, especially if there's a recession that comes up. I think that's going to be something that tends to drive kids back into our space. So that's all we have to be part of these projections.
Thank you, Tamara. Okay, our next speaker is Dion, followed by Stacy. Good morning, Dion. Hey, Dion, you there?
Hello.
Okay, we can hear you.
Oh, thanks for turning in. Anyways. Okay, so outside of this process is buildings in the construction phase and their review and the superintendent's autonomy to rezone out those buildings when nobody lives there. There's, in all the years I've been tracking this, I haven't seen any transparency on that. I know in the Midtown cluster, Mr. Drake, I brought this to your attention 2 years ago and asked for some information that most of the buildings were zoned out of the Morningside area of Midtown. And then one that year was zoned out on the west side. But where can we find the transparency on that process is question number one. And then question number two is, a couple of years ago, I can't remember if it was 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, I dropped the presentation in the comments. You guys presented these live births and construction, but you presented them by cluster and clearly called out that some clusters were growing at different rates because buildings were being built at different rates and live births were different in different rates. And we're not seeing that same thing now. We're just hearing the last year and a half, this overarching live births across the city or nationally, when we know different pockets of the city have different growths and developments and whatnot. So the decisions might need to change based on cluster. So when are we going to see an updated report like that?
All right. The first one is that you're talking about the minor redistricting process that we use. Just to let folks know, board policy AD allows staff to recommend to the superintendent. The superintendent has the authority to move redistricts, minor adjustments to redistricting if it affects less than 10 current students. And so we've exercised that a few times in the last few years, and the process is when we do actually exercise that. It goes on to the board meeting. So the transparency is that it shows up at the next board meeting as an information item. And we've done that. Yes, we have done that a few times of some future apartment complexes or future residential developments. Before students come into them, we've registered those out of Midtown to both North Atlanta and to Washington cluster to help stave off any additional overcrowding at Midtown High School. So we've done that within the authority of board policy AD.
I'm just talking about the process in itself, not once the decision's already made, but where is the monthly update and how that process is being done across all clusters, how you look at that. So it is equitable and transparent. Like we reviewed all of these buildings, these were considered, these were not, that are around the border of different clusters, not just Midtown.
Yeah, we don't, again, we use that if we either need some minor corrections or if we see some things that when we get building permits that come in, if we look at that, then we will generate. We don't do necessarily an annual or a monthly comprehensive review of that. This is used as an ad hoc process, and that's what it was intended for. To answer your second question about live births and construction and when you'll see that. So I believe what you're referencing was the detailed information that came out of the facilities master plan that was done a few years ago. I can tell you that we do track live births and construction by the different clusters, and we do get from the Georgia Department of Public Health, we do get the number of live births by elementary school attendance area, each of the 45 of them. And we use that to then project our kindergarten enrollment and all that down at the elementary school level.
Wonderful. If we could get some transparency around that, like you gave us the information by cluster, that would be amazing.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. If you either through Let's Talk or an email to me, send that to me. We'll make sure we get that to you.
Thanks, Dan. I think you're right. I think this transparency is important for these rezonings that do happen. I feel like we do hear them ad hoc, but I think it'd be useful to hear them systemically. So we'll take that back.
All right, thank you, Dion. Our next speaker is Stacy, followed by Melvin. And again, Melvin is our last speaker as it relates to facilities. And then we'll pick back up with Waukesha to open it up for our just general dialogue with Dr. Zeff and administration. Good morning, Stacy.
Hi, how are you? So I have some general feedback and just a question, and it's primarily for Ken, but related to this facilities conversation. I'm a Midtown cluster mom. I am highly concerned that the district and the BOE are spending yet another year discussing problem solving and prioritizing capacity, quote unquote, issues in the Midtown cluster, while other clusters' academic performance and proficiency rates continue to plummet, and over the last 4 years have reached absolutely abysmal lows. Over the last 4 years, certain BOE members, APS facilities, and the district has dedicated a significant amount of time, money, and brain space trying to perfect capacity in this cluster to the detriment of other clusters and where there are truly fires. So at this point, it doesn't seem the numbers show that there's a capacity issue at this moment right now at Midtown High School. It's the highest performing high school in the district, 26 AP courses, proficiency rates double some other schools, and the kids are happy. My kid is there. He doesn't feel like it's crowded. Since we clearly have demonstrated that we cannot effectively address all these issues, can we deprioritize conversations around Midtown capacity in these upcoming facilities conversations and focus on conversations that address the $100 million deficit or the abysmal proficiency rates when it comes to other clusters and particularly the Black children in the district? Thank you.
Thanks for that, Stacy. And so just to be, I appreciate you calling that out. This is not meant to be a Midtown capacity discussion. I know that's how people hear it, and obviously District 3, but all these issues are interconnected. And so if you're talking about freeing up resources, a lot of the resources are here. And so this is an instructional conversation, because to get those resources out of non-instructional assets into instructional assets where they can make a difference. But you're right to hold us to this. I mean, this is, and I say just to lift up that comment. I saw a few folks in the chat say, why aren't we talking about instruction? All these things are interconnected. Just last night for 2 hours, we were talking about science of reading and our reading policies. This is not meant to be the entire conversation of the district. We're trying to map to issues that are on folks' minds. But as we move through this process in the spring, Stacey, you are exactly right. And we need to have the lens of how can we can only spend $1 once. How can we make sure we spend that dollar in the most effective way to drive outcomes for kids across the district? And it's good, but we do have to understand. That's why I appreciate this slide that we're looking at right now. All of this is interconnected, but please continue to hold us to that.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Good morning, Melvin.
Hey, good morning. How's everyone today?
Doing great.
All right. Well, I have a couple of things I would like to get answered. First, I'll start with the bus depot at Metro Atlanta. All right. I had to troubleshoot a heater the other day, and I needed a scissor lift just to reach the heater in the ceiling. And that didn't make any sense to me because, for one, heat rises to the top of a building, and all the cold air that needs to be heated is at the bottom of the building. And you have the heater so high that you have to bring in extra equipment, which costs more time and money just to service them. And then another scissor lift just for me to replace the board again. Like, it's taking extra time and extra money, where if you would just lower the heaters a couple of feet.
Thank you, Melvin. I'm glad you got the right people on the call. So I know we'll take that back, and we appreciate you raising the issue.
And at Lakewood Bus Depot, I'm unable to clean any of the condenser coils that are there on the air conditioning systems because there's no water spigot for me to plug into. It's easy to send a plumber out there and install a water spigot so I can get water and clean the air conditioning units like they're supposed to be cleaned.
Appreciate that, Melvin. Those we'll make sure that gets back to the right folks. Also, Let's Talk is a great place for those specific items. So thanks for your service, APS.
All right, last thing. Yeah, my truck. The heat doesn't work. The air doesn't work.
Melvin, Let's Talk would probably be the right place to make sure we get, or you can send an email. And I'll put my information in the chat. But you have a facilities team also. They'll be sure to follow.
Yeah, Melvin. Mr. Robert Palmer will give you a call. Appreciate the feedback.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Melvin. And so now, community members, we have just now opened it up for general conversation. So all things related to District 3 or just APS in general, Board Member Zeff and administration is here to engage in dialogue with you. So we'll go back to Waukesha.
Yes, thank you, Keith. So I have two things real quick, and I put it in the chat. How is APS? Because APS, the people in the city of Atlanta have truly lost faith in APS, and that's another reason why, on top of gentrification, that's another reason why enrollment is plummeting, because people is not trusting APS with their children education. So what is APS doing to pull those families? And it's not just wealthy families or families that's well off, it's families of all kinds. What is APS doing? One, to pull those families back into the school district, or to have them bring their children back to APS. And I can tell you, a lot of these problems that we're here and having, like, it's not making people feel safe and comfortable to bring their children back. So something different need to be done. I don't know if this is a board issue or this is a superintendent or our staff. The other part I have to raise is, where was the input for the public comment? Because now that we are talking about academic, we're talking about facilities, all voices must be heard. I know the charter renewal is coming back up, and I know that community input is vital. So who made that decision, and why was it changed 3 times? Because it looked real sloppy, and something to be done to kind of only hear certain voices. Because like I said, we coming and we not playing about our schools.
Thanks, Lakeisha. So just to the first point, what makes people want to come to Atlanta Public Schools? I do think, part of it is being transparent, and part of it is having a vision for the future. And I think part of the work that Dr. Johnson is leading is getting out in the community, letting folks know this is a high quality option for your kid. Again, I put my kids in the schools. Katie puts her kids in school. A lot of folks on this call put their kids in the schools because we believe in public schools and we believe in Atlanta public schools. And I agree with you that the past may be there's turbulence along the way, but our best days are ahead of us. As far as the public comment piece, we're going back to this will be in January for folks just to catch the rest of the call up. Public comment had always been in person. It's like that in every other district in Metro Atlanta. It was a COVID condition to allow folks to dial in. It's turned out to be pretty disruptive to the meeting. And so I think the plan is to go back into January that, again, folks can come and have their voices heard at the board meeting. I will say, though, please, yes, the board meeting is an important place to hear your voice, but there are so many other places to get connected. And so we are prioritizing folks to be in person for that public comment, but please don't look at that as where the only way to engage in the progress. Certainly Go teams, which I didn't mention before, in addition to all of the other mechanisms that I laid out. So thanks for raising that issue.
All right, thank you, Waukesha. We'll go back to Tamara. Good morning again, Tamara.
Good morning. I'm glad you mentioned the Go teams, and I'm hoping that they can evolve to be that kind of feedback loop, because right now there actually is no protocol for the Go teams to interface with the board or the administration. So if we can put something into place like we used to have with local school councils, where there is a communication protocol, how to raise your concerns either through the Go team or through the cluster advisory team, I think that would, give people another outlet, to feel like their voice is being heard. But my comment was about the literacy. I appreciate the panel last night. I was not able to come. It was my child's birthday. But the feedback I've gotten was gratitude that we're focusing on the younger grades and the early learning. The policy does state K through 12 because we recognize, that we have kids who need reading instruction after third grade. And I understand that rollout is a process and a difficult one, but that's the feedback I'm getting is we have kids in middle school and high school, as I know, being on a Go team at the middle school and the high school level, where you have intensive reading needs. And so what is the plan? I mean, rather than, just say, oh, well, it didn't work out when they were younger, oops, because we can't give up on kids. And so that's the feedback I'm getting from other parts of the city is, hey, that was a great panel, but what about our older kids who really need help right now?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I've been following this work very closely in Marietta, and they're going through the same process right now. I think the sequence is right to get it right at the K-5 level, because that's the majority. If we can be preventative and get ahead of it, so everything's not remediation. But you're exactly right that we have challenges in middle and high school. And so I think as we get organized to implement, I think the literacy policy gives us all the runway that we need. Now it's about execution and implementation. And so you'll see this investment K-5 right now. But it has to extend to middle school and even into high school because too many kids are being left behind. So the answer is we're just sequencing it, I think, to make sure we get the foundational work done in K-5.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate, it's urgent for those kids who didn't get it before, to be able just to access the material. So whatever, please don't put it on the back burner. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tamara. Next, Dion.
I just wanted to piggyback off of Tamara. This actually came up briefly at our Go team meeting at Howard. I sit on the Go team there. We also mentioned this at the Readers for Leaders and talked to Dr. Battle about this. It's been brought up numerous times. What are the supports, not only for the students in middle school and high school, but for the teachers to help these students who cannot read and need early learning for reading to improve their reading ability. So again, to Tamara's point, and you guys ask us to engage and to speak up. I think we have numerous times. Probably a year now, regarding needs for middle school and high school and literacy and advocating for it. A timeline would be great. on what a tentative timeline on what a plan is. I know that the last time I heard at the Readers for Leaders, there was a plan that was being formulated. I do understand that changes happened in the department, but we can't just, to Tamara's point, put this on the back burner. We're 3 months into the next year and these kids just keep getting pushed up and up and up a level. And I know that the teachers have reached out and, when they have 11 kids in their class that can't read for various different reasons, and have 4 kids, 5 kids in their class that are at the other end, it's very challenging for them because they don't technically have the resources or know themselves how to teach reading at the level these kids are at, or even what level that they're at. I know that a screener was supposed to be rolled out. They stopped that. As a PhD level speech pathologist, I have significant concerns. We're just pushing these kids through, and we have the means and we definitely have the money to do it.
I don't disagree. I think we have to, again, I've studied a lot of I spent a lot of time in the Marietta story and getting K-5 right. And, so the need is there. It's just getting organized. I think, but we're going to take this back and make sure the plan is explicit about middle and high school. I think there are components. I don't have it in my head right now. And focus on K-5, but yeah, you're absolutely right. But it's just a question of sequencing. It's not a question of urgency.
Well, when we're as Go teams making these strategic priorities right now, and we are putting out there, literally it's just grab a number out of the sky, a 4% gain on ELA, that's just thrown down to the teachers. And for these teachers who don't have the resource to teach these kiddos or the training, it is just a very heavy lift. And we're losing teachers like that feel like they are not equipped to help these kids and they feel like they're failing them. So I don't think it's fair to the teachers or fair to the Go teams to put these, we want you to make 5% gains or 3% gains in 1 year, and we're not going to provide you with the resources. And really we need to not lift that higher level 3%, although we should, but we can't get that 3% gain from only lifting, or 3% increase from only lifting the top half. Does that make sense?
No, I appreciate
And we can't,
Yeah.
and we can't do it without resources. And it's so unfair to the children and to the staff.
We will ensure. I mean, it has to happen. And we'll continue to make sure that the administration prioritizes middle school or secondary education.
So maybe Go teams could get a presentation, a short little blurb on what the update is on literacy across the district. And maybe that is something that, all Go teams look at, because that does impact K through 12. Because it appears to me that of the last 10 years I've been tracking Go team, and now being on it, this is the year that we've been given the least amount of guidance. Usually it's like, this is what your goal is going to be about. And it's made to look like we actually write them, but that's not the case. But I do think a literacy push out to all Go team members to talk about and what that looks like in their school and their challenges, and actually make the Go teams present data on reading at their school and reading proficiency at their school is necessary. And part of our chart, and should be, according to our charter, we should be presenting that data. We're ignoring it by not looking at it.
Yeah, I look, I'm a huge proponent for Go teams. This is the lever of change. We'll take these back. These are I think ideas that need to, when we take these back to the administration.
All right, thank you, Dion. Just a time check. The time is 10:54, so we have roughly about 6 minutes. And so our last 3 speakers will be Maisha, Nate, and Ms. Sherelle. And so, good morning, Maisha.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to speak on the literacy and math as well for the older students, because I'm at an actual charter, and I realized that they pick out their target groups based off what comes up in milestones or what may come out on MAP. However, it is students who, because of COVID, like my daughter, she went into COVID and she was in the middle of kindergarten. And so she missed all those foundational years, but she's still a high achieving student. But because she missed those foundational years, it's kind of interfering with her inference and understanding and comprehension. But because she's doing well in the grade level that she's in to a certain extent, they have no resources, and they're putting fourth grader, she's a now fifth grader, and they've put her on the back burner, like kids in that category from third, fourth, and fifth grade, because the first graders tested really, really badly on statewide and like map testing. And so I'm really in agreement with the other parents who have been saying we have to figure out how to get our group of children who's about to age out of school, because we're trying to focus on K-5, but we have 9th and 10th graders who are not about to be able to enter into college or be able to function highly in society because they do not have those foundational things to go and be successful because they are being overlooked. And so I just wanted to also just touch on that, and just like I seen something today, it was going to be an audit on charters. I'm for that as well, because I feel like it needs to be transparency and accountability on so many other different levels. And I just thank you guys for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Maisha. I too look forward to that charter audit to help with elevate some of these issues.
Yep, thank you, Maisha. Our next speaker is Nate, followed by Ms. Sherrill. Good morning, Nate.
Hey, good morning. Hey, want to address the issue of the public comment component. You mentioned pre-pandemic, you weren't Zooming, but before the pandemic, speakers had 6 minutes in totality. That is, if a person yielded their time. So each individual speaker had 3 minutes. So if someone yielded their time, they would have 6 total. So if you're going to go back to the old ways, you need to make it beneficial for people to take the time out of their schedule to go downtown instead of having 2 minutes, and then you're starting late. Another component is, I wish you guys would be more forthright in the conversation of the budget. If you're $100 million short in the budget, well, you have to mention the charter and partner schools that you're funding, which you have no authority over. You don't manage those schools. Basically, you're a check writer for those schools. And now, in the areas where the enrollment is low, you're not addressing the fact that, hey, just because the enrollment is low, students there are still students who reside in that area. The Washington Frederick Douglass cluster, you have about 5,000 students in that area, but they're being pulled by the charters and your partner schools. So we're going to have a conversation about budgets, closures. Just be forthright. Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback.
Thank you for that feedback, Nate. My last speaker is Ms. Sherrill. Good morning, Ms. Sherrill.
Good morning. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay. I want first thank you for allowing me to speak, but I want to address the fact that we still have not dealt with the audit from the special education, from the Department of Special Education. But what I want to know is what about the students with disability? You had a meeting at the Atlanta Speech School on yesterday, and you're talking about literacy, but yet and still we are still missing the mark with the students with disability. We are violating their rights to be educated, and it appears to us, and I'm talking about us as parents with student with disability, that you're dismissive and indifferent. And I'm just wondering, how long are we going to continue to sit here and let the Atlanta public school system, independent school system, the Atlanta board, to continue to be dismissive about the student with disability? How long are we going to have to wait? You asked us to look at the order from 2014. Now you're asking us to wait for Dr. Johnson. And now we're at this point. And I will tell you, to this day, I just went to an IEP meeting on yesterday. IEPs are still being carried out. But are they carried out based on the way the law requires? No. But you continue to be dismissive. When are we going to stop this? We talk about facilities and budgeting, but we're not educating children. When are we going to really get serious about literacy?
Thank you, Ms. Sherrill. And just so folks know, the audit did get released over the summer, and part of Dr. Johnson's 100-day plan is to come back to us how we will implement it. But you're right, the audit made it very clear we've got lots of work to do, and the first step is to identify that, name it, own it, and then we're looking to Dr. Johnson to implement the recommendations from the audit to make sure that our special needs kids get the support they not just that they need, but that they deserve. Thank you for keeping us focused on our special needs kids. It is 11 o'clock, y'all. Thank you for engaging in this conversation. I've got a page full of notes. I know staff has been here. Thank you to Katie and to all the staff for being here. We appreciate you, and we look forward to continuing these conversations via Let's Talk, via in person, via our next board meeting, via our next community meeting. Keith, anything else before we let folks go?
No, I just want to always remind people that these meetings can always be found on the ABOE TV YouTube channel. And so please, if you ever need to go back and reference anything, you can always find this meeting and all previous meetings on that YouTube channel. And so without further ado, that is it. Your exit ticket is a wave.
All right, y'all. Have a good weekend. Thanks for taking the time.